2011, the year that marked the end of the SmackDown vs. Raw series, which started all the way back in 2004 and ended with what many consider to be the best in the series, SmackDown vs. Raw 2011. The SmackDown vs. Raw games are remembered as being some of the greatest wrestling games we've ever gotten. So when the series came to an end and it came time for a new set of wrestling games to take its place, many were skeptical of what was next. How were THQ and Yuke's going to follow up a series that was as beloved as SmackDown vs. Raw? What were they even gonna call this new wrestling game? You know, maybe my expectations were a little too high. Released in November of 2011, WWE 12 was met with pretty positive reception from not only the fans, but the critics too, and you know how much of a bitch it can be to please them. The point is that despite it being the end of the SmackDown vs. Raw series, and it being a completely different game compared to what people were used to, people really enjoyed WWE 12, and it's easy to see why. This game was truly something special, and I don't think any WWE game that followed it has reached the level of quality that it was at. Not to say that games like WWE 13 and 2K14 were bad games. I mean, for one, those games in WWE 12 were pretty much the exact same gameplay wise. I'm just trying to say that WWE 12 did certain things better, like having the Road to Wrestlemania mode, for example, not to mention the amount of WCW legends featured in this game's roster. I also just really love this game's whole aesthetic when it comes to the look of the main menu and cover art. Both WWE 12 and WWE 13 have some of the best cover arts I've ever seen when it comes to wrestling games. It's the type of box art that gets you hyped to play the game, and when you actually do start the game, you get this badass intro that's pretty reminiscent of the old Raw and SmackDown intros we used to get with rock music and whatnot. That begs the question though, is the gameplay as good as the game wants you to believe? Well, let's find out. The gameplay of WWE 12 is, well, to put it simply, fucking awesome. WWE 12 took everything from SVR 2011, like the simulation style gameplay and the insane weapon physics, and improved on them, which is probably the best thing they could have done, as SVR 2011's gameplay was damn near perfect. Now, going back to WWE 12 after not having played it in almost a decade, it was certainly a little weird to get used to the way this game played. The gameplay, while similar to 13 and 2K14, was a bit slower paced than it was in those games. Not to say it's slow to a point where it's not fun, but it is noticeably slower. Despite this though, every strike still feels relatively fast and fluid, as well as impactful. That's the one thing I love the most about this game, is that every move has impact to it. When you put someone through a table or hit a finisher on your opponent, you can really feel the impact, and honestly, some of that is just down to the awesome camera angles and sound design. Something else I really enjoyed about the gameplay is that you're pretty much free to do whatever you want. WWE 12 lets you play without limits, which is exactly the type of thing I like in my wrestling games. I love being able to place weapons wherever I want and use them however I want without the game telling me, no, you can only place this table here, not there. There's other little things about the gameplay that I enjoy as well, like the fact that you can take weapons from the crowd in Extreme Rules matches, and even being able to just wild out in ladder matches. The fact that I can do a top rope dive to my opponent on an announce table as fucking Mark Henry really speaks volume to how fun the gameplay is. Part of what makes WWE 12's gameplay as fun as it is the chaos of it all. This game is just all around unpredictable. One minute you're hitting a pedigree on the ground, the next you're 10 feet in the air. Why? I don't know, but it's goofy, and that's why I like this game so much. WWE 12 is one of those games where you can just shut your brain off and have a good time. It's an arcade style wrestling game at its core with simulation mechanics baked into it, but the simulation stuff doesn't bog down the game, causing it to be slow and boring. Hell, if you want, you can just turn adrenaline off and bam, problem solved. Put somebody through an announce table or whatever. Overall, the gameplay of WWE 12 is really fun. Now sure, is it perfect? No, there's certainly problems, but all games have problems. Just look at 2K20. With the bugs and glitches I encountered in WWE 12, none of them really ruined the experience for me. Now the one thing that I feel really made this game awesome was the addition of Create an Arena. Create an Arena is something that of course we still have today in the newer games, but this game actually marked its first appearance, which is really cool. Now because this is the first appearance of Create an Arena, it is pretty limited, but it's still a really nice feature. You're still able to recreate actual WWE arenas if you want to, but you also have the freedom to just make something like whatever the hell this is. Now before I move on to Universe Mode, there's two more things I want to talk about. The first of which being the roster, because while it's not 100% perfect, it's certainly on the smaller side compared to the rosters of other wrestling games, but it still had superstars that actually added some of value to it. Of course, the roster featured just about everyone who was with the company at the time, like Yoshitatsu, Vladimir Kozlov, and Evan Bourne, but it also featured a lot of WCW and WWE legends like Arn Anderson, Kevin Nash, and Vader. As for the match types, you got your Hell in a Cell, Inferno, and Extreme Rules, and all of them are about as fun as you'd expect them to be. Anyways, now that I've talked about the gameplay, match types, and the roster, I think now's a good time for me to talk about the other modes. Now it's time for me to talk about one of the best modes in this whole game, Universe Mode. Universe is a mode that no matter what game I try it in, whether it's 2K14 or 2K24, I can just never get into it. Essentially, Universe Mode is you running each show the way you want. You can pick your roster, brands, and completely customize your show schedule to make it your own. Usually whenever I try Universe, I end up getting bored pretty quickly, but Universe Mode in WWE 12 is just a whole different story. While Universe Mode in the other games gives you complete control over what happens on your shows, this game doesn't really do that. Instead, WWE 12 makes things more interesting by adding in all these different surprises and cutscenes in the mode so you're never able to predict what's gonna happen. For example, when you play and win your first match in Universe Mode, you get a victory animation like normal, and just when you think the match is over, out comes Brock fucking Lesnar, who, mind you, wasn't even signed with WWE at the time and was still in UFC, and he comes out and just kicks your ass. By doing that though, you also unlock Brock as a playable character outside of Universe Mode. Things like that are what made this mode so fun in this game, and I found myself legitimately getting into it because of it. There's so many other things that I didn't even mention, like the fact that there's drafts in this Universe Mode as well, which is something I don't even think we have nowadays. But the point is, WWE 12's Universe Mode is really fun, and if you haven't tried it, I highly suggest playing it because it's way better than the Universe Modes we have now. The last thing I want to talk about before I end off this video is Road to WrestleMania. Road to WrestleMania has always been one of my favorite modes in the WWE game. It started in SmackDown vs. Raw 2009, and WWE 12 would end up being its last appearance in a WWE game. Road to WrestleMania up until WWE 12 had always been pretty straightforward. You select a story, the story follows a specific superstar, and lasts up until WrestleMania. Each story would always be separate from one another and would usually be pretty short. So WWE 12 said fuck all that and had a whole 12-hour long story instead. The road to WrestleMania in this game is absolutely insane and could honestly be a whole video on its own, which I might do at some point, so for that reason I'm not going to go super in depth into the story. Plus, if I did, this video would be like 2,000 hours long and I really don't want that. The road to WrestleMania in WWE 12 is broken up into 3 stories: the villain story, the outsider story, and the hero story. The villain story follows Sheamus and his faction, the United Kingdom, as they aim to completely take over the WWE, which they do by winning every title in the company. The faction then implodes, leading all of them to face off for WrestleMania, where Sheamus single-handedly wins every title in the WWE, and normally for your average road to WrestleMania, that would be where the story ends. But instead, out comes Triple H to challenge Sheamus for the WWE Championship. This then begins the outsider story, which follows Triple H as he tries to accomplish his goal of becoming a 17-time world champion. When you finally finish the outsider story, it ends with Triple H straight up retiring at SummerSlam after becoming WWE Champion once again, in turn becoming a 17-time champ. This then leads to the hero story, which follows your custom superstar named Jacob Cass, a rookie who won NXT and is trying to prove himself in WWE. During the story, it's announced that there's a new general manager in control of both Raw and SmackDown, and not too long after that, it's revealed the general manager is actually Kevin Nash. This then leads to Kevin wanting to bring back WCW, and to do this, he brings back a bunch of WCW legends like Vader and Road Warrior Animal to fuck shit up. The story ends up becoming a battle between WWE and WCW, with Jacob Cass being the main hero. When the story finally reaches its conclusion, Kevin Nash and WCW take control of WWE, with Monday Night Raw turning into Monday Nitro. And rather than the story ending at WrestleMania, it instead ends at WCW Starrcade, which is just the coolest shit ever. Overall, the road to WrestleMania in this game is dumb fun because of how over the top it is. It doesn't try to be serious or anything like that, and it really makes the mode more enjoyable. This road to WrestleMania is, in my opinion, the definitive road to WrestleMania mode out of all the SmackDown vs. Raw games that feature the mode. In conclusion, WWE 12 is one hell of a wrestling game. The universe mode, as I said earlier, is incredible, the gameplay is just amazing, and the road to WrestleMania with its incredible stories is enough to put anything George R.R. Martin has ever written to shame. Hell, you can still play the game online if you have the online pass, so why don't we try that? Nobody joined.